Now, the rise of the Heliopolitan priests. All right. So the connection with the Neteru or Neterra is revealing since Potiphar. Remember the biblical character Potiphar. Recall later in the story under the slightly altered name Potipharah. Potipharah. Potipharah in Genesis chapter 41, verse 45, meaning he who Ra gave or has given. Potipharah. So, so this is said to have been the priest, a priest of On or In or Inu, the priest of On or On, the Hebrew name for Heliopolis. So Potiphar or Potipharah was a priest or connected with the priesthood of Heliopolis. Joseph was a slave to Potiphar. Potiphar was connected to that priestly group. Okay. Now, with Amenemhat the fourth patronage to Heliopolis and his active connection with Atum, maybe the priests of Ra felt they would have also be influential in the affairs of Egypt again. They felt like because of this new king, this new guy Amenemhat the fourth, everything was going to be well. They was going to get their power back. They was going to get their situation back, and it'd be all good. But something happened to Amenemhat the fourth. Something happened to him. Okay, so now this in chapter 3 brings us to the heart of the transformation, right? The rise of the Heliopolitan priesthood. Heliopolis was the city of the sun, was a home of the cult of Ra, and the doctrine of the divine creation through Atum, which is also known as self-begotten. We're about to get into Kemetic science. Here we go. Here we go. All right. This theology was remarkably different from Hermopolitan and Theban systems that had traditionally supported the balance of Ma'at, which is truth, order, and cosmic harmony. So the people of Heliopolis was on one side, and the people of Waset and Hermopolitan, they were on another side. And Sobekneferu was in the cut, right? As the Heliopolitan priests gained influence, they began to rewrite cosmology. They went in there, I told you, they went in there and started rewriting on sacred text. They start rewriting things, placing the sun god Ra above all other deities, because at one time they was all connected together. This was not a religious evolution. This was a spiritual takeover. The people of Heliopolis felt like, okay, since Amenemhat is in the mix, since he's already in power, okay, since he's doing this, we're gonna do what we want. And we got Joseph over here. Yeah, we're gonna start rewriting some stuff. What them books say? We're gonna rewrite. We're gonna make our own book. We're gonna make our own thing and make our own ideas. And because Joseph, he's a dreamer, so he's gonna co-sign. And then Potiphar, he's cool with it. Yeah, and we don't know for sure where Sobekneferu. I heard she's from Sobek, so she really don't count. So they rewrote everything. A spiritual takeover. I told you this was not just a political thing or economic thing. This started becoming a spiritual thing. Under Sobekneferu, a woman who had inherited the rule from a sacred bloodline tied to the crocodile Neteru and the primal waters, the Heliopolitan doctrine posed a threat. Yeah, they rewrote this stuff, but then here come this sister here. She was raised different. Her allegiance is different, and she posed a threat. Amenemhat the fourth is gone. Why? Because we don't know what happened to him. But what we do know is that Sobekneferu is now in his place, and she's not siding with us. Brother Ferguson really believes that somebody or a group or organization decided to take her out. It was fire overtaking water, sun overpowering the hidden stars, patriarchal theologies supplanting the cosmic feminine, and therefore Kemet was in isfet or out of balance. When you start rewriting things, when you start neglecting the ancestors and all these things, you start getting out of balance, right? So the priests aligned themselves with political factions who no longer saw divinity in the female body, nor legitimacy in the female rule. They didn't like that. They didn't like what was going on. In their doctrine, the queen became an anomaly. So in their view, this random queen, even though she was born here, she was born into power and all these things, she became a threat. That's what happened. So Sobekneferu, to these priests and these other guys that were trying to get over, she posed a threat. Yeah. She became a disruption. She became an obstacle. Yeah. I told you we about to get involved because she did not like all these foreign people taking over and occupying all these sacred spaces. She wasn't for that. The other king he was cool with it. He's gone. So now Sobekneferu had to handle it. So according to the Heliopolitan priest, Sobekneferu became a problem. Yep. So the spiritual and political rise of the Heliopolitan priesthood, to understand the gravity, we got to understand. To understand, it's not, y'all. It's not just. Let me remove this real quick. This is not just people, right? These are age-old factions and forces in play. Okay, you guys. I wish you guys could understand. Okay, these groups have been in place in Kemet up at this point from the Old Kingdom or pre-dynastic period, an estimated 2,500 years already. It was already rolling. So here come Sobekneferu changing everything. They didn't like that. They didn't like that idea. Okay. And it was messing with their money. Messing with their pocket. Okay. But let's explain why. Why is it a problem? Why is it a issue? Because it's a major shift. It's a major change, right? Heliopolis, known in ancient times as Inu or On, the pillar of the sun, was of the oldest and most sacred religious centers in all of Egypt, in all of Kemet. This is according to scholars. So long before Waset or Thebes rose to prominence, Heliopolis was a home to the priesthood that guarded the most abstract and metaphysical creation theology, the Ennead. Let's get to it. Kemetic science loaded. Here we go. A family of 9 primordial Neteru, beginning with Atum, who emerged from the chaotic waters of Nun and birthed the Neteru through self-generation, through his own power. In this cosmology, Atum Ra was the source of all, not just the sun in the sky, but the spiritual force of creation itself, the seen and unseen, right? Now, speaking of Ennead, the esoteric Ennead, solar code and cosmic gatekeeping, we about to lean further into the Ennead, but I want you guys to understand that these stories, these journeys are ages old. All right. So the priests, okay, we're gonna get to that. So the priests of Heliopolis developed an elite metaphysical and practical system. It emphasized chaos, order, light, darkness, life and death, all these things, and the principle of Ma'at. So over time, this doctrine gained not only spiritual authority, but immense political influence. And remember, get this, these priests were not just temple functionaries. We talked about priesthoods and all that before. Many were trained in the liberal arts and sciences. Many were trained in astronomy. There were scribes, theologians, and royal advisors. So they had a lot of pull, and they was in a lot of places. So many were trained from childhood, born into hereditary priestly lines, schooled in the meta nature. They knew the book of coming forth by day, backwards and forwards. They knew the coffin text, the pyramid text, the Fayum text. Okay, and so this was like second nature to them. But here's where it becomes complex. Here's where it becomes difficult, right? The issue is why the Heliopolitan priesthood preserved profound and spiritual and sacred science, including detailed knowledge of the solar system, the solar cycles, cosmic harmonies, and architecture of divine order. They also became the gatekeepers. Yeah, their knowledge placed the sun god or the Neteru Ra at the top of everything instead of it being an even balance. Okay, it became a hierarchy instead of a circular system. This hierarchy conveniently aligned with the pharaonic rule as long as the ruler was going along with what they want to do. So here we go. Here comes Sobekneferu, right? A woman, a sister on the throne who was already an anomaly, right? She broke the matrix already. A woman invoking the ancient goddesses, okay, the ancient ancestors. She sent that's what she relied, that's what she rested on. She rested on the older traditions, the older ways, right? And so these traditions were before the Heliopolitan group, the Heliopolitan past. So this was a feminine cosmology. Okay, this was rooted in stars, water, and the crocodile god, the crocodile Neteru Sobek. So this was far more than an anomaly. She was a challenge. She was a problem. So Sobekneferu, she presented herself, represented a different idea, different strand of Kemetic spirituality. One linked with the primal waters to the noon and to the divine feminine as cosmic womb and regulator of time. Her association with the seven stars, we're going to talk about that. Her association with the seven stars, referencing the Pleiades or the seven Hathors. I did not know. Did you know? Did y'all know? Because you guys are really smart. Did you know that there was seven Heteru? There was seven Hathors. Because remember, okay, a segment was a variant of Heteru. So there's seven. Wow. So Sobekneferu was a direct call to the pre-solar stellar-based tradition that saw the stars as the source of divine cycles, not the sun alone. Because a lot of the older monuments, was lined up with the stars and not the sun and the moon. Okay. Now, the Heliopolitan priests would have seen this as heresy. But it's funny, whenever the priest didn't like anything, they call you a heretic. So, or worse, it was a return to a dangerous instability, something that that instability was a thing that they couldn't control. That's what it meant. They couldn't control it. So Sobekneferu couldn't be controlled, and certainly not the primordial Neteru or the ancient ancestors. They certainly couldn't be controlled, right? So let me repeat it. Sobekneferu's association with the old ways, the seven stars, likely referencing Pleiades or the seven Neteru. Once again, did you know about that? Because this in the book. It's in the last chapter, the goddess of the seven stars. It is in the last chapter. Yeah, we're gonna get into that. All right, hit the like button. We're gonna talk about that. But because we're gonna talk about that fall from grace. Did she get to a point to where being here, it really didn't matter to her anymore? All right, let's go. So, as I said earlier, Sobekneferu represented a different strand of Kemetic spirituality, right? One linked to the primal waters, the primordial waters, to the noon, and to the divine feminine, the cosmic womb, and regulator of time. Her association with the seven stars, seven Hathors. This was like I said before, this is a direct call to the pre-solar and stellar traditions. that saw the stars as a source of divine cycles and not the sun alone. Okay, so they saw her as a heretic. Okay, so what did they do? What did they do? What did they do? The priests of Heliopolis, they began consolidating their power. Okay, they started to combine forces. Yeah, the record suggests that during and shortly after Sobekneferu's reign, temples aligned with Ra or Atum gained unprecedented endowment. So the funding started going back to those temples. The books was rewritten, okay, and those hymns to Ra and all those Neteru became dominant in court liturgy. And in the years that followed under the 13th dynasty and later during the rise of Akhenaten's father, Amenhotep, the sun cult would reach nearly absolute supremacy. So the idea of the Atum came from somewhere, and I believe it came from the priests of Heliopolis. So her Sobekneferu's entire reign was a defiance of the priesthood's narrative. Okay, Sobekneferu was totally different. She didn't care about none of that. She cared about Kemet as a nation, right? She ruled through the power of Sobek, the crocodile Neteru, and tied to the primal waters and not the sun. She invoked the seven stars, likely referencing to the pre-dynastic stellar priesthoods and celestial Neteru like Shishat. Okay, Shishat and the seven Heteru outside of Ra, outside of Atum. And she crowned herself, or she was crowned in Sutbiti, right? So how did they respond? Okay, they had what you call a silent takeover. Yeah. She already, Sobekneferu already had the army. She already had the military. So the priests had to move different. Okay, they didn't need armies. They had tools of erasure. They had the ink. They had papyrus. They had the scrolls and even oral transmission. So they tried to paper Sobekneferu out. Yeah. Or also, the likely method of her removal was ritual archival. Her monuments were left incomplete. We've seen the statue. Okay, defaced or repurposed by later kings. So, and in official theology, her reign became a problem to be corrected by the divine will or a brief misalignment in Ma'at. So that what they were saying, that if the priest had something to say about it, Sobekneferu was a mistake and she should not have been in power. So we're going to do a silent takeover, a spiritual assassination, and eventually be historical amnesia, even though she by right is the queen and king of Egypt. So in this way, Sobekneferu's fall was less than a political collapse and more of a spiritual excommunication. Basically, she was stripped of divine legitimacy. In the eyes of the new priesthood, her mythos dissolved. Her soul, according to their theology, may not have even been allowed passage through the Duat, the underworld, unless she has secured protection through older and hidden rites, right? So we have the labyrinth. She had to take that journey. I believe that the labyrinth was a external manifestation of what she was going through on the inside, because she was the builder of the labyrinth. All right. So, and I think that she was guilty by association. She was guilty because she went with the old ways and not try to run with whatever everybody else was doing. But as a ruler, that's what you got to do. You got to make your own mind. You got to do your own thing. Okay. Everybody may or may not agree with you. Okay. So in this way, this was a spiritual communication. Like I said, her soul, according to their theology, may not have been allowed passage through the Duat. In other words, this is according to them. But now, unless she secured protection through older hidden rights. Now, we already discussed the fact that Heteru did get involved. Okay, so I don't think at this point it really mattered what the Heliopolitan priesthood was going to do or say. So Sobekneferu was already set. She was already ready to go to that next path or that next level, right? So do you think, again, do you think she saw this coming? Do you think she saw this coming? Like and comment below. Do you think she saw change coming? Do you think that she became aware of this, right? So some oral tradition and speculative sources suggesting Sobekneferu received premonitions of betrayal, possibly through dreams or seers or even stellar alignments, because she was a priestess before she was king, right? I'm sure she performed obscure rituals near the end of her life, offerings to the seven stars, the Netzeru, disappearances from the capital, and pilgrimage to the temples wasn't working anymore. Okay, so I think she started to see that the Chamber of Ashes was going to have to be her last resort. I think so. So could she have attempted to preserve her spiritual essence in another form? What do you think? Okay. Do you think she tried to ascribe her being in the stars instead of stone? Because remember, she was connected to stellar and celestial ancestors of Netzeru, older ancestors. By that time, according to the pyramid text, by that time they became the imperishable stars. So do you think that she was trying to do that also? Instead of going dealing with stone, she was becoming a star. Okay. She wants to leave behind a mystery and not a monument. So I think that was her ultimate path. She wanted to become an imperishable star, right? So so she may have succeeded. Okay, I think she may have did that for through her body, even though her body was lost, her story continues, right? But get this, the roots of that rise again here. So with the quiet, calculated displacement of Sobekneferu's legitimacy by the increasingly powerful sun priest of Inu, her theology may have worn the robes of cosmic truth, but in practice, she may have. A lot of these guys was preaching and talking about it, but she was actually doing that, right? So this left no place for. They didn't like that. They didn't like that. So when we speak of Sobekneferu's fate, we are not only speaking of a monarch losing her throne, we are witnessing a spiritual restructuring of civilization. Okay, orchestrated by a priesthood whose influence would shape Egypt for centuries to come. So Sobekneferu was that last, I think, the last guard in the sense of the old order. I think so. Speaking of that, here we go. Here we go. The Esoteric, Ennead, Solar Code, and Cosmic Gatekeeping. Yeah, we about to get into this conversation. You guys asked about Kemetic science and everything. Make sure you get your pen and paper, and I hope you got it ready. So, at the core of the Heliopolitan theology lies the Ennead. There's 9 primordial Netzeru whose symbolic relationships form the cosmic architecture of ancient Egypt's worldview. So before we get into that, though, got a question. Before we get to that, teleportation or time travel? Teleportation or time travel? Like and comment below. Teleportation or time travel? Like and comment below. Now let me know. Okay. All right. Now, here it is. I hope you got the stuff together. I hope you got something to write. People ask for it. Here it is. The Esoteric, Ennead, Solar Code, and Cosmic Gatekeeping. At the core, like I said before, at the core of Heliopolitan theology lies Ennead, the 9 primordial intelligences, the ancestors or Netzeru, whose archetypical interplay encoded the metaphysical DNA of Kemet's sacred science. For more than divine genealogy, the Ennead was a cosmic vibrational formula through which the ancients mapped the descent of spirit into matter and return through initiation. Again, this was not just a formula. This was a map, a breakdown to show how the spirit goes into matter and returns from matter back to the spirit through what? Through initiation. Okay. Now, we have Atum. Okay. We have Atum, the self-created one born from the primordial waters of Nun, initiating creation through thought and a word, the self-begotten monad emerging from the Nun, the abyss of infinite potential. He is undivided point. He's the undivided point, pure will and intention, right? His creation of Shu and Tefnut by spitting or sneezing was not a mere act of generation, but a release of a word or a seed of consciousness into polarity. This archetype of divine energy before separation. Now, the divine sequence begins from the divine sequence or separation begins from Nun to Atun in the coffin text. In the coffin text, it says this: I am Atun when I was alone in Nun. I am Ra when he comes into being. That's coffin text number 714. Atun is the first name in the Ennead. He's not personified as a god in the beginning, but an abstract force. He's the Zep Tepi, the first occasion or the beginning before the beginning began. Pure consciousness emerging from the Nun, the infinite primordial waters. Nun represents the quantum field of unstructured potential, the void from which all existence arises. Atum does not create through tools or hands. He creates by spitting or sneezing or speaking. That's why your words have power. That's why the things you say are important. That's why it's important that we pay attention to what we say and do to people, right? Now, the language and breath, the first manifestation is duality, and that is Shu and Tefnut. Shu means air, and Tefnut means moisture. His twin offsprings establishing the duality of breath and flow. The duality of breath and flow. The first breath of and sacred fluid together, they symbolize the unity, and they complement each other. They complement each other through motion, spirit, and soul, and sky, and breath, essence, and emotion. In esoteric anatomy, they correspond to the inhale and exhale of the cosmic breath, the prana and the bindu, the bindu, or the life force and divine essence. Shu, the netaru of the air, breath, spirit, and life force. Tefnut, the netaru, the goddess of moisture, tears, fluidity, and the soul. Their creation marks the first split between masculine and feminine currents. Okay. In the sacred space in between. Okay. In the pyramid text, number 600, it said, I gave birth to myself together with Shu and Tefnut. I joined my body with my shadow. That's in the pyramid text. The Ennead begins with one thought and one power. It talks about self-generation and light and darkness. Atum creates not out of power, but through union with this Ka and this Ba. All right, let's go. Now, Geb and Nut. Geb is the earth and Nut is the sky, right? Geb and Nut. Celestial mechanics and the womb of the stars, okay? They are the separated lovers forming the terrestrial and celestial spheres. Once united in primal embrace, now separated by Shu, who upholds the space between them. Nut is the celestial dome, the womb of the stars, the keeper of ancestral gates. Geb is the receptacle, the alchemical retort in which transformation unfolds. Their children were born not just biologically, but cosmically. Okay, so it's not just biological, but cosmic. Okay, as a manifest of their inner state. So from the union of Shu and Tefnut came Geb and Nut, earth and sky, originally united in sacred embrace. They were torn apart by Shu, by breath, by wind, who lifts Nut above him from the heavens. This separation wasn't punishment. It is necessity for manifestation. Creation requires boundaries. You hear what I said? Creation requires boundaries. It does happen. Sometimes you got to, in order for you to do your best work, sometimes you got to get away from people, right? Nut becomes the celestial vault, her body arced over the world, her womb holding the constellations, all 12 constellations, right? Every evening she swallows the sun. Now, in the book of Coming Forth by Day, it says every dawn she bursts it anew. Okay, Nut, according to the book of Coming Forth by Day, Nut gives birth to Ra each morning, who receives him in her body each evening. Okay, Nut is the cosmic mother. Her body is the zodiac, right? Geb beneath her becomes the material plane. So we have the vertical axis, the spirit above and the matter below. Okay, as above, so below, right? Between them is humanity. Between them is humanity. So then we have, of course, this is the illustration. This is the illustration of the, believe it or not, this is, of course, the weighing of the scales. And there's the Ennead at the very top right here. Okay, the Ennead is at the very top. Okay, and we have Tahuti. Okay, we have Anupu, and we have the person's heart and the feather. All right, his heart is being weighed. Right. So we have Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, the divine archetypes of life, death, magic, conflict, and hidden wisdom. These four, okay, complete the Ennead and represent sacred quadrature. Okay, life and death, and order and chaos, wisdom and mystery, seen and unseen. Osiris is the vegetative king, the dying and raising principle. Aset is the living Heka or magic, embodying devotion and Neteret of divine memory. Set, even though Set is misunderstood, he's misunderstood. He holds the key of disruption because that's necessary. Chaos is sometimes necessary. Okay, he's a necessary instigator of spiritual trials. Nephthys is the priestess of twilight, the guardian of threshold states, hidden processes, and nocturnal mysteries. Okay, let me break this down. According to ancient tradition, from Geb and Nut are born four powers, right? Okay, but not just deities or Neteru, right? They was forces within the initiate, within the person, those who are seeking knowledge. Every aspect or every element that's represented is seen in the heart and mind of somebody who's seeking knowledge. Okay. Osiris is seen as the green one, the divine king, a symbol of resurrection and spiritual rulership. He is the inner power, right? The part of the soul that dies and is reborn, right? That resilience, that rejuvenation, right? Aset, the throne and the intuitive mind, the mistress of magic. She remembers the dismembered parts of spirit and brings them into wholeness again. Okay. Set, the storm and chaos, but also the strength to overcome adversity. That's why whenever you see a king, he's situated between Heru and Set. Okay. Nephthys, the veil, the hidden guide. She governs the liminal spaces, twilight, transition, dream, and death. And you will see Nephthys with you've seen her around like the various coffins. She is the guide. She's guiding the ancestors to the other plane, right? And the temple of Isis, the inscription says, "I am Isis. I am she who is all that has been, is, and shall be." So she says, "No mortal has ever lifted my veil." This is Isis. Together, these four represent the sacred Ennead, right? Life, death, love, shadow. In alchemical terms, they are stages of inner purification. Yeah, inner purification. Now, get this though. According to Baba Kaba in his book, that also the Ennead, all nine of them represent molecules on the periodic table. So they were symbolic of a chemical, okay, of a chemical process of creation. So they just say, okay, this represents an atom. This represents moisture. This represents electricity. Each one of the Enneads represented some part of creation. Okay. But here's the thing: in earlier cycles of in Kemetic spirituality, this journey was not linear but cyclical and balanced between male and female polarity. So Atum's creative act, it wasn't alone. Aset and Nephthys were twin aspects of the sacred wisdom. Nut and the sky Neteru was the star womb which all life descended. Okay. So by the time, get this, by the time Sobekneferu came on the scene, the Heliopolitan priesthood had subtly reconfigured this cosmology, this idea. They reset that, and they elevated Ra Atum above all of them. They positioned Shu and Geb, the masculine principles, they put them higher than the feminine. So now this goes beyond myth. This goes into the inner alchemy, because each and every priest in the priesthood had to go through a process of change, right? So in esoteric terms, the Ennead was not just a family of natural gods or a theological structure. It is a template of the soul's descent into matter and its return to divine consciousness. It is a blueprint of the soul's alchemical evolution. The 9 stages, get this, the 9 stages mirror the 9 levels of creation. The 9 Neteru, 9 levels of creation, from unmanifest source to material density. Disclaimer, before we go further, I'm gonna tell you this. I am not that knowledgeable in alchemy. Okay, I'm not him. I'm not that person. Okay, I am not. All I know is a little bit of African history, a little bit of Egyptian history, and that's it. All right, if you want to look into that, there's books out there. All right, let's go. So now, the soul. Remember, the soul begins as Atum, whole, pure, undifferentiated. Right, as it descends through duality, Shu and Tefnut becomes entangled in the dynamics of form, Geb and Nut. Right, and eventually experiences polarity, passion, loss, and birth, sadness, joy, Osiris, Set, and Nephthys. This descent is the soul's connection back to matter, but it is the initiate's journey. The goal for the initiate, the goal for those who are seeking in knowledge, their goal is to reverse this process, not just linearly, but cyclically and spirally, right? Going back up. So in temples of Heliopolis, initiates were taught that these Neteru also existed within them. Okay. So through Heka, magic, or meditation and sacred geometry, they could awaken this divine knowledge, reunite Nut and Geb within, and become stars reborn through Nut's celestial womb. So the Ennead is a ladder. Each level, get this, the Ennead, if you write it down, the Ennead is a ladder. Each level is a phase of initiation. Yep. Each level is a phase of initiation. Okay. So we have Atum, the divine seed, Shu, the breath of life, Tefnut, the soul, which is fluid, Geb, the body, Nut, the spirit, Osiris, consciousness, Isis, memory and will, Set, trial and friction, Nephthys, the hidden key. Okay. So yeah, we may have to get into the book of Gates. I mean, we have to get into that, but 9 is the number of gestation. The human fetus takes 9 months. Okay. The soul too. It must pass through 9 gates before it can ascend, according to African custom, according to Egyptian custom, right? These correspond with the 9 pylons of the Duat in the book of Gates, a secret known to the temple initiates, seekers, and who never, these people never shared that information to those who were unprepared. Okay. So the 9, according to the book of Gates, the Amduat, the 9 are the beings of the house of Ra. Their names are hidden, their forms unknown. So we don't have time right now. We don't have time to break all this down. But let me know if you want me to discuss the book of Gates. Like and comment below book of Gates. Okay, don't comment below. But something changed. Okay, something changed. Solar politics and the hidden feminine in early cycles of Kemetic spirituality, balance between masculine and feminine polarities was essential. Atum's first act was neither male or female, but it was both connected as one. Nut and Isis were not passive figures, but they were active. And the priestess of Sheshat and Heteru was held once powerful initiatory roles. Okay, so I think I'll get back to that. So, but as dynastic politics took hold to society, especially by the 12th dynasty into the reign of Sobekneferu, Kemet's first verified queen, some subtle engineering occurred. The priesthood of Atum began to centralize their power through solar symbolism, and they tried to offset what Sobekneferu was trying to do. Atum is now supreme, and Shungeb, the masculine aspects were elevated. So, trying to see how much time I got now. But dealing with solar politics and the hidden feminine, as dynastic politics took hold to society, especially the 12th dynasty and into the reign of Sobekneferu, Kemet's first verified queen, some re-engineering occurred. The priesthood of Ra began to centralize their power. The sun became the portal of renewal, became the emblem of singular authority. The Pharaoh, once the bridge between realms, is now portrayed as the sole keeper of Ma'at and divine order. And that was, to them, that was a no-no. Okay. And so Ra-Atum is now supreme. His light became the justification of absolute power. The Ennead, once a mystical cycle, was now flattened into some kind of hierarchy. Shu and Geb, the masculine aspects, were elevated as usurpers, upholders of Ma'at. The divine feminine was increasingly ritualized, preserved, but not empowered. So they tolerated the feminine aspect of the Ennead, but they didn't give it any power. Okay, so it says the king is Ra, his word is law, all gods bow to him. This is new kingdom inscription. This is totally different than the equality that the Ennead originally had. This translation mirrored the rise of solar monotheism under Akhenaten and earlier tendencies in Heliopolis. The Ennead became solar formula used to encode time, a royal and royal legitimacy, and temple architecture rather than soul's liberation. The Ennead was originally for the initiate. Okay, it wasn't just something just to build temples with. Okay, so the shift elevated masculine deities such as Ra, Shu, and Geb, and while the divine feminine was veiled, hidden beneath the layers of myth and priestly interpretation, Aset was retained for her magical power, but her revolutionary aspect, the seeker of divine justice, the builder of thrones, the restorer of broken cosmic order, was subdued. So they liked the part about her having magic and everything, but they didn't like the part where she got active and involved. Yeah. So now we have Sobekneferu, whose name invokes both crocodile Sobek and the beauty of Neferu, reawaken the older traditions. Her patronage of temples linked to Sobek, Hathor, and Net suggests she drew upon pre-solar and stellar codes, cosmology, where the feminine was not peripheral but central. This was not her thought process. The way she was handling business, it wasn't a byproduct. The ancient ancestors was not a byproduct. They were in the forefront of her mind. So her reign was a metaphysical riddle. A woman enthroned in a solar hierarchy designed to suppress her very being. Mm-hmm. And I also believe she knew the stars. I believe she got to the point that she went from trying to put things on stone to put things in the celestial. She was starting to get to the point. In my opinion, I think she was getting beyond that. She was getting beyond wood and stone and everything. She was going somewhere else with it. Okay, like and subscribe, by the way. Now, so a queen pharaoh who ruled in the shadow dynastic collapse. Her name invokes crocodile god Nisru Sobek, the primal waters, the Neteru, the divine feminine. Sobekneferu built temples to Sobek and restored shrines and to female deities like Hathor and Net. She rejected the strictly solar model and she went back to the pre-Enneadic cosmology, the ancient, the ways of the ancestors, pre-dynastic, okay, older and lunar and stellar traditions where the goddesses ruled the cycles. So in doing so, she became a symbolic issue. Okay, I told you she was different. I told you she was different. A woman crowned by Ra's light, yet attuned to deeper powers. I think her powers was way more than they can control. Okay, so the new kingdom, the Ennead became a solar algorithm used to legitimize kingly divinity, codify time like the temples and so on to regulate cosmic balance through the royal cult. But to the initiated, to the people who really understood, the Ennead remained a living map, a ninefold spiral of becoming something, of creation. Each name a resonance, a key to unlock the multidimensional self, because we're not just 3D, we're multidimensional, we're multifaceted. 9, as I said before, the number of gestation, the triple triad symbolize completion before rebirth. Completion before rebirth. The Ennead, therefore, was not a conclusion, but a threshold, a beginning. To stand at the ninth gate was to face yourself, stripped of illusion, into your own reality. Only through balance and chaos, like Set with harmony, Osiris, intellect, Shu with intuition, with matter, with the spirit, could the initiate pass through beyond the sun into the starry halls of the Duat. Yep. So to understand the Ennead today, in our time, is to reclaim the original meaning. It's not just telling time, it's not just telling stories. It's not a doctrine of power, but a map. Ennead is a map. As I said before, a lot of these physical chambers, a lot of these halls, a lot of these chambers under the pyramids, under all these places, it was spiritual and symbolic, not actual. It was there. Yes, you saw it, but it was a spiritual idea. Okay. So it was a map. So get this. Each deity is a gate. Each Neteru, each ancestor was a gate, a vibrational current. We're in the Kemetic science. Okay, here we go. Atum teaches solitude and wholeness. Shu teaches breath and balance. Tefnut teaches emotional wisdom. Geb teaches groundness. Nut teaches cosmic vision. Osiris teaches death and renewal. Isis teaches sacred memory. Set teaches teaches courage in chaos. Set teaches courage in chaos. Nephthys teaches surrender and silence, right? So together, all 9 together, they form the 9 spheres of the soul known in the temple tradition there's 9 parts of the soul according to Kemetic knowledge. There's 9 parts. The Ren, which is your name. The Ba, which is your personality. The Ka, which is the vital force. The Ab, or the heart. Shut, or the shadow. Sakim, which is the power. Ku, which is spirit. Sa'u, the immortal body. The Ankh, which is the luminous soul. That's why names are important. That's why they wrote their names everywhere. And that's why some of our ancestors would name their children after them, so that their name will always be called somewhere. Because when you call somebody's name, you're remembering them, right? And here it is. Pyramid text, number 571. Raise yourself, O Osiris. Take your throne. May your Ba live, your Ka be mighty, your Sha'u shine. Sa'u, by the way, is another word for star. Okay, your Sa'u shine in the sky like Ra. Okay, Pyramid text 571. So the Ennead is not just static doctrine. It's a living spiral, right? And memory encoded in stars, temples, and DNA. Like we talked about the Jed before, to work with it undergoes transformation, not the belief, but a being, right? The ancient Egyptians didn't worship the Neteru. They became them. They represented them through ritual, initiation, sacred drama, inner work. they activated these energies within. So to walk or to talk, even talk about the Ennead like that, is to return to the source, to reclaim the gatekeeping, is to awaken the divine feminine, even fellas, that too, right? The hidden memory and the spiral path that leads back to new star embrace. The Ennead became a formula used not just to expand the soul's perception, but to validate a priestly hierarchy aligned with the king. And so, and when the king was a woman, it invoked the other Netaru, because normally it's a guy. Now it's a sister. The older Netaru, the stellar tradition, Sobekneferu became symbolic contradiction in the system. Her very existence will raise the throne's contradiction. So, yeah, here it is. So we talked about the esoteric Ennead, spiritual assassination. I still got a bonus. The road to destruction, fate of Sobekneferu, impending doom coming up. Now, spiritual disintegration. Yeah. Priest prophecies and the kingdom's collapse. Yeah. Sobekneferu became a major problem. She became a issue, right? So the priests of Ra saw Sobekneferu's rule as a aberration, one that needed to be corrected. The power of the Heliopolitan priesthood and their centrality in Egyptian theology was growing even stronger. The system rooted in the belief that the sun, Ra, was the supreme deity. He couldn't coexist with Sobekneferu's with her cosmic vision, which centered on the watery fertility of Sobek and the mystical hidden powers of these seven stars. The Ennead, as we discussed, had been reinterpreted. They didn't like that old idea, so they got the new one, right? Atum's role as self-creator was now cast in the image of Ra and the solar force of Sobekneferu's adherence to the older, more fluid cosmology tied to Aset, Nephthys, and the stars was seen as a problem, as a threat. So, and the same goes when Joseph comes into play. So, the grain supplies were faltering, the crops were in jeopardy, and Joseph's influence over the Fayum had centralized control, pushing aside older traditions of divine abundance and connected to these new people. Yeah, the Heliopolitan priests, seeing an opportunity, began to assert their own influence over the king's court and subtly displacing Sobekneferu's traditional advisors, particularly to those loyal to the Atum. Okay, so when Sobekneferu met Joseph, because I told you they did have an encounter. Okay, now the realization that Sobekneferu might have known Joseph, whether he be an important Hebrew who rose to become vizier of Egypt or just a composite character, expressing the greater achievements of Egypt's Western Asiatic population, is a possibility. Okay, now remember, Sobekneferu's the Pharaoh's daughter. So when Joseph was charged with undertaking these building achievements, when she was a part of those achievements, when he was a part of those building sites, Sobekneferu was privy to it. She knew about it. She knew what was going on. So it is a possibility that they did have some interaction. Okay, according to the Coptic, he said, you know how dear such daughter of mine to me, and you see it's time that I would assign her someplace where she may be mistress and whereof the revenues may be sufficient to maintain her. And I do not find any lands beside my own which I can give her, unless it be in the Fayum area. So the king is saying, okay, if she's going to be somewhere, she's going to be in a place where she can thrive and grow. Okay. So I'm sure, according to historic custom, that Sobekneferu did meet Joseph, especially during the time where they was building those canals along in the Fayum. Now, road to destruction. Yeah, road to destruction. It's unfortunate situation where we have these different factions closing in on Sobekneferu because her father's gone. Amenemhat the fourth is gone. So to gain support for their demands, the priests of Heliopolis will perhaps have attempted to convince important and influential members of the royal court, as well as the country's native and foreign population, that this female pharaoh was taking the nation down a road of destruction. Remember, the Heliopolitan priests gained a lot of influence and power, and now because of Sobekneferu coming with the old ways and not really kind and not really happy about these foreigners being there, they're trying to sway the narrative that she's not good for Kemet, even though a lot of them people are foreigners, right? And so he said, according to Collins, they would have surely have highlighted the fact that everything had been fruitful during the reigns of her father and her brother, but all of a sudden there's a drought. As soon as she get in there, it's a drought. And so people are gonna talk. People they're gonna look, they're gonna say the sky's falling and everything. They're gonna say, yeah, it is, right? So this unfortunate situation would have been made worse by the fact that some of the excess flood waters had previously drowned parts of Lower Egypt were now being successfully diverted into the Phaeton's Great Lake. So they think, okay, well, because it was flooding and all the water was everywhere. Now there's no water. Not knowing scientifically, they have taken care of those canals previously. But public opinion, it don't matter. They just know that it's not flooding anymore, and she's a problem. Remember, the king, be it the king in his or her capacity, is connected to Heru, okay, the divine rainmaker. And since she's here, the Nile has not been flooding, and we're starving, and we got these issues. So their absence, so the rain's absence in time of inundation will be unquestionably blamed on her. So the Heliopolitan priests had something to say. They would seize that opportunity to say, see, I told you, it's her fault. Yeah. So in addition to this, the Heliopolitan priests would have rightly spread rumors that Sobekneferu was responsible for the death of her brother, the king, which along with the Neteru denying Egypt a fruitful harvest, provided proof that she was not supposed to be king. So they're saying that she's responsible for her brother's death or stepbrother and for the drought. Yeah. So the fate of Sobekneferu, what happened to her? Okay. It could be pointed out that during the Middle Kingdom or the Second Intermediate period, Barbara Bell wrote that in the time of trouble, both by poor floods and unusual uncertainty about the identity of the true Heru, or the true king, will be secretly murdered or expected to commit unalivement when his coronation was not followed in due season with floods adequate to avert scarcity. So, if correct, Collins believed that because the floods didn't happen, she was supposed to give herself that good old permanent relaxation. Okay. Before all this take place, though, there seems to be likelihood that Joseph, the vizier of Egypt, would have delayed Sobekneferu, would relay to Sobekneferu these accusations being leveled against her by the priesthood. That's what some people like to say. What this would have meant is doing whatever it took to get influential members of the royal court to forcibly remove her from the throne, and as consequence, suffer the same fate as her brother. So Joseph, like somebody, think Blue mentioned that somebody may have let her know, and according to some tradition, a lot of people would believe that Joseph told her that the priest was after her. So Joseph advised Sobekneferu of her impending fate. She believed what he said. So despite any antagonism that may have existed between Sobekneferu and the priesthood and Egypt, Western Asiatic population, it symbolized in Hebrew and Arab Islamic tradition by stories of Joseph. There does appear to have existed, Joseph may have existed, as we will see during this time frame. But her issue to them was who she was siding with. She was with the old ways. And so history tells us that Sobekneferu, this is impending doom, right? History tells us Sobekneferu and the nationalistic supporters of the incoming 13th dynasty were right to have been concerned about the long-term future of Egypt. For the rise of the Canaanite-led 14th dynasty unquestionably opened the door to a lot of problems. So Sobekneferu saw that coming. She saw those issues happening. You know, the prophecies of dreams and drought, alignments to the sky, the signs of impending doom were everywhere. The priests read the stars, and what they saw was troubling, and they whispered of a kingdom stretched thin, divine protection withdrawn from the land, and Ma'at was not in balance anymore. And so she, even though she was a queen in her own right, things was changing all around her, right? So divine judgments was happening. The sun was being eclipsed, and drought and famine, and all these things was happening, right? And they echoed through the halls of Egypt's temples and palaces. And so Sobekneferu eventually had to make some decisions. She had to make a choice. So we arrived to the end of Sobekneferu's reign, a queen who dared to embody the throne of Heru, a woman crowned by both divine lineage and sacred duty. Yet even this sacred can be silenced when power, fear, when it comes down to the fear of the unknown. The Heliopolitan priesthood, once keepers of divine order, became gatekeepers of memory, redefining the narrative, realigning the myths, and rewriting who had the right to rule. Their betrayal was not political, it was cosmic, it was spiritual. As we have seen, the erasure of Sobekneferu was not only a loss of a ruler, but the loss of balance in the sacred equation of Ma'at. The Ennead, with its 9 divine principles, reflected more than Neteru. It encoded the structure of the universe itself, and it was a map. So to disrupt it was to set chaos in motion. The arrival of Joseph and Fayum, the shifting centers of power, and the growing rift between spiritual science and priestly control all marked the early tremors of an Egypt on the edge of collapse, an empire rich in mystery yet teetering on a spiritual fault line. So Sobekneferu's legacy challenges us to look deeper, go further, and not just in history, what history tells us, but what our heart would say. Okay. Her story echoes across time, reminding us that the fate of a nation is tied to how it honors the truth and who it chooses to forget. So, we just got to talk about priest prophecies and the last queen and the tragic fate of Sobekneferu. I told you we was going to do a little bit of Kemetic science and all the things. And so I'm very happy about it. We got a few more episodes of the Queens of the South. So if you are listening, we about to get